Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. My name is Nick Marro with Occupy Fantasy. As always, I'm here to help you break down tonight's MLB DFS main slates on both DraftKings and FanDuel. You can find me on Twitter at Nick Marro DFS. If you haven't already, please like the video. Also, subscribe to the channel. It helps us get more free content like this out to you on a regular basis. Also, if you're not a member of Occupy Fantasy, check the links in the description below. As a member, you get access to the models you'll see me using throughout the video. We also have a single lineup builder, multi lineup builder, and a private Discord server full of DFS pros to help you improve your game. For MLB, we also have the Daily Plug article, of which I'm a contributor, which will feature our favorite arms, bats, and stacks for each main slate. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into it here. We have a nice 10 game slate, which is actually small for a Friday. I'm hoping to keep this video under a half an hour. I think we might be able to do it today. I have Hunter Renfroe pulled up here, and some of you may be asking why. He's one of the top plays in our model, not quite towards the top, but in terms of point per dollar, he's one of my favorites. The Angels are in courts tonight taking on a lefty. Hunter Renfroe, coming off of paternity leave, just had a kid, should be locked in here. Really hoping he's in the lineup, probably batting fifth or sixth. But obviously, guys like Otani, Trout, etc., are all excellent plays, but point per dollar, Renfro just too cheap on both sites. Seeing that 4,500 price tag over on DK, I think he's 3,100 on FanDuel. But just wanted to start kind of highlighting him. But yeah, let's get into it here. We got 10 games to get through. As always, I'm going to talk through the pitching matchups, let you know which pitchers we should be focusing in on. If we are honing in on a stack and they are priority, I will break down which bats from that stack we should be prioritizing. And as always, I have my little notepad file up here. You can see I'm going to write top pitchers, top stacks. And at the end of the video, I'll kind of give a high level overview of where we're at and what I think we should be honing in on. But yeah, like I said, 10 games, going to try to keep it quick, at least relatively speaking. But let's get into it here. First game on the slate, we have Logan Gilbert and the Seattle Mariners taking on Kyle Gibson and the Baltimore Orioles. So if you are using the models, just make sure you have the DK main or FanDuel main slate selected so you're not getting those 640 games. I don't think. Yeah, the slates are identical tonight, 10 games on both sides, so no issues there. But yeah, we do have some weather concerns in these early games. Seattle and Baltimore, looks like there could be some rain here. And yeah, it's just really tough to call forecasts like 12 hours prior to lock. Not quite 12 hours anymore. I think we're 8 hours prior to lock now. But looking at everyone's favorite DFS weather reports, this game's in yellow right now. So it's at least worth monitoring. Logan Gilbert popping as a top five arm here. Obviously, kind of tricky matchup against these Baltimore Orioles. Orioles have been hitting the ball very well this year. But yeah, Gilbert also pitching very well. So no real surprise that we're seeing Gilbert towards the top of the model, holding opposing hitters to just a 287 WOBA, showing around a 26% K rate. Not really drawing a ton of ownership. He's sub 10% on both sides, a product of the weather potentially. But for me, I don't mind Gilbert here. Certainly more of a GPP play in a difficult matchup against the Orioles. But I will say I respect him enough probably not to want to get to Orioles bats. If we click over to the stack page, no surprise, Baltimore really not showing up anywhere near the top, certainly the bottom half. So yeah, if you're going to take anything from that side, it's probably Gilbert. Plenty of upside. He does have to deal with some tricky power bats. But yeah, still no Mountcastle back for the Orioles. They're a little bit banged up. We're seeing Ryan O'Hearn projected to hit cleanup, who does have really solid numbers against righties, but I don't know. I think over the course of a season, if he's hitting cleanup, that probably doesn't benefit them much. So yeah, I like Gilbert here, in so many words. On the other side of things, we have Kyle Gibson. So taking a look, Gibson just outside of the top 10. He hasn't been terrible. Just a 17% K rate this season, though. So in years past, I know Gibson's always kind of known as being an inconsistent arm, but when he's at his best, he strikes out a lot of hitters. This Mariners team does offer plenty of K upside. They K around 26% of the time against righties, but the issue is Gibson's swing strike rate's under 10%. His K rate's down around 17%, so I do not have much interest in him here. And while the Mariners are certainly a team that strikes out a lot, they do have some upside in this matchup. Not going to call them a priority. If I were to go to Mariners bats here, it would probably be the lefties, guys like Kellenic, Raleigh. J.P. Crawford, and a dirt cheap Mike Ford at the bottom of this order if you really need a cheap one off. But it's really tough for me to prioritize anything from this game other than maybe Logan Gilbert, and even then, he's more of a GPP target. Moving into the next game on the slate, we have Dane Dunning in the Texas Rangers taking on Clark Schmidt in the New York Yankees. This is another game where we're a little bit too far out to know what's going to happen with the weather. As things stand, it should go, but we definitely have to monitor it. The good news, I think, is that we're not really going to be interested in either pitcher here. We see Schmidt and Dunning both popping towards the bottom of the model, but we click over towards stacks. Yankees just outside the top 10. I thought we'd see Texas a bit higher. Schmidt has had issues with lefties in the past, so if you do go to Rangers bats, guys like Nate Lowe, obviously Corey Seager, who's been outstanding, looks really good here. John Heim as well, all solid options if you do want to attack Schmidt. But I can't really call Texas a priority stack as things stand. Pretty low total. On the Yankee side, they are popping pretty high, a little bit higher than I expected, kind of floating just outside the top five, within that 5 to 10 range. And yeah, Dunning hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't been great either. This season, his K rate's way down, so kind of similar to Gibson. This is a guy who's always kind of boomer bust, but when he's on, he was at least getting strikeouts. We're not seeing that out of him at all this season. Just a 14% K rate, 8% swinging strike rate. So the Yankees wouldn't be an insane option here. I think you'd favor the righties slightly. Dunning's shown reverse splits to start the season, so guys like Stanton, Torres, Donaldson would be okay here. Just in their current form, it's really tough to trust any of these Yankees bats. So for me personally, I don't really want to call them out as a priority. Especially if we're dealing with weather issues, but keep an eye on that one. Obviously, they do have some upside, and they are very cheap with guys like Aaron Judge out of the order. But at the same time, I mean, the offense has been very cold lately. So personally, this scheme's kind of a wash. I don't really want either pitcher. I could probably get to maybe some Texas Rangers lefties, but there's no priority stack in this game on either side. Moving into the next game on the slate, we have Kodai Senga taking on Taiwan Walker. That's the Mets at the Phillies. Jumping over to the pitcher page, Senga popping as the third best arm on the slate. So we take a look at the weather in this one, and it's even worse than the two prior. So this is another situation we're going to have to monitor. If this game does go off as scheduled, I do think Senga is viable, even in a tough matchup here against the Phillies. The Phillies show around a 24% K rate against right-handed pitching this season. Senga still dealing with some walk issues, but around a 28% K rate, 30% K rate against lefties. And the Phillies, I mean, most of their best batters are lefties, so he should fare pretty well in this matchup. Looking at around a 12% swing strike rate for him. So as long as the weather holds up, I do think Senga is a viable option. But again, we really need to wait and see. Um, but the good news is, not only is this a 10 game slate, so if it doesn't look good, you could go elsewhere. It's also one of the early games. So we should know kind of going in whether or not we want to play him, if there's going to be a delay, what the forecast looks like. But again, it's still 7, 8 hours out from the start of this slate, so we're going to have to wait and see. But I'm certainly not all that interested in Phillies bats. On the other side of things, I mean, Taiwan Walker's been better than expected. Still not an arm I'm ever excited to get to, but I mean, he's coming off 3 starts where he's combined 21 Ks. 2 out of those 3 starts, he struck out 8, scoring over 20 DK points in all 3. So he's in excellent form right now. He's taking on his former team here in the New York Mets. Just pulling up some of his numbers. But yeah, 20% K rate, and we're seeing an 8.9% swing strike rate. So he's getting a lot of called strikes. I think we do see some regression in his numbers. Don't know that I want to get to him, especially if the weather's going to look like this. Looking over to the stacks, though, Mets, Phillies, both outside that top 10. I don't think we need to prioritize either side there in terms of bats. But yeah, I mean, Walker's tempting at his price just looking at game logs, but I don't want to look too deeply into that. I could actually pull up his XFIP real quick here. One of the sites I use doesn't have all the stats in one place anymore, so I have to have a few separate windows open. But um, yeah, while I'm loading Walker up, I mean, you got to be careful when reading game logs. Obviously, you look at his recent performances, he's been absolutely outstanding. That's likely to drive his ownership up, but we take a look at his XFIP. 4.31 ERA on the season, 4.42 xFIP. So yeah, no major regression expected out of him. 274 BABIP's actually pretty average as well. I just know historically he's not really an ace type arm, so I don't know that I could trust him here against the tough Mets lineup, who does have Alonso back. They are pretty healthy right now. Even Vogelbach's been hitting the ball relatively well, and he's been mostly terrible this season. Walker historically had some issues with lefties, so for me, the one piece of this game I have interest in, if the weather cooperates, is Kodai Senga on the Mets side. But it seems far more likely that we're just gonna be able to kind of look over this one. So again, another spot we're gonna have to look at the weather. These next few games, weather not as much of an issue. We got an indoor one here. James Caprillion and the Oakland Athletics taking on Chris Bassett and the Toronto Blue Jays. So you see in the model here, sorting by OF index, Bassett popping towards the top. He's been really solid. His numbers are a bit skewed because he struggled earlier in the season. Um, and yeah, he did not look great his last couple starts out in Baltimore and Texas. But this is another arm I want to dig a little bit deeper into because if the model's liking him this much, I do expect part of it is because um, he's facing the Athletics here. But I do think another part of it is he's likely been the victim of some bad luck. So pulling up some numbers on Bassett. Obviously, the A's, not the best offense in baseball, 25% K rate against right-handed pitching this season. Bassett, in spite of his early season struggles, around a 21% K rate, 9% swing strike rate. So his K metrics are down. Um, but yeah, the thing is, he's a lot cheaper than the other top arms. 9,200 on DK, 9,300 over on FanDuel. I think the biggest favorite on the slate, so you're very likely to get that win bonus as well. So yeah, even if he allows a couple runs here, I do think that he can hit value at that price relatively easily. I guess value is subjective, but I do think he can score you probably over 20 DK points, around 40 FanDuel points with relative ease, even if he's not at his best. But yeah, his xFIP and ERA are kind of similar as well. So no major regression in either direction here for Bassett. Just a really good matchup against Oakland. I'm gonna have to list him as a priority. I will say if he's gonna be the most popular pitcher on the slate, I probably will look to get a little bit different. Um, but yeah, monitor the ownership there. But he does certainly have plenty of upside in a favorable matchup against the Athletics. We click over to the stacks page. Toronto, just outside the top five. I think this is the first stack I really want to talk through. Taking on James Caprillion, who's been mostly terrible this season. Um, Kid has some talent. He was pretty well regarded getting into the league. Just really hasn't shown much of it. We're looking at, excuse me, 6.48 implied run total right now for the Blue Jays. And yeah, Caprillion, he hasn't been as bad as expected, but I think when you dig a little bit deeper into the numbers, you're going to see yeah, certainly not an arm we want to avoid stacking against. 235 ISO allowed to lefties. Blue Jays a pretty righty heavy lineup, but he allows a lot of contact to the righties as well here. So Farso and Belt probably the best power options here in this order, but guys like Bichette, Jansen, Guerrero, Chapman, you could get Kiermaier from the left side for really cheap. Springer leading off remains affordable on both sides, especially on FanDuel at 2,900. So you look at this whole team; they're very popular on both sites, but I think they should be. Caprillion, the type of arm who struggles at times on the road, and a lot of his underlying numbers suggest he's probably due for some regression here. Again, 361 WOBA allowed to opposing hitters, 170 combined ISO allowed, 235 to the lefties. So do favor the lefties bats here, but we have to like the Blue Jays, one of the top stacks on the board. But yeah, just making note of that. We can move into the next game here. We got Wade Miley and the Milwaukee Brewers taking on Shane Bieber and the Cleveland Guardians. This one, there is some rain in the area, but it's not as much of a threat as we're seeing in some of those other early spots we talked about. Wade Miley, not going to pop in the model here. Not much K upside even when he's on point. Shane Bieber, just outside the top five. I mean, historically, he has been a high strikeout pitcher. Come back down to earth a little bit this season, but this is a very nice matchup for him here against the Guardians. Or excuse me, against the Brewers. The Brewers strike out more than 25% of the time against right-handed pitching. Bieber, pretty low K rate, but holding opposing hitters to a 304 WOBA, 143 ISO this season. And his swing strike rate has climbed over 10%, so maybe we start to see more Ks coming out of him. But we have seen season highs for several teams against these Brewers, and this is the type of spot where I think Bieber is going to be someone you're going to want to consider. 9,400 on DK, 9,600 on FanDuel, similarly priced to Bassett. Not quite the same upside, but I do think he's at least comparable. So I do like Shane Bieber here versus the Brewers. On the other side, we talked about Miley, not really an arm we have much interest in. I can't imagine Cleveland pops too highly in the model. Yeah, they're way down there. I mean, the issue with them, just a 124 ISO against lefties. Bats like Jose Ramirez hit left-handed pitching really well. They got David Fry in there, young first baseman. He has some upside in this matchup, but as a team collectively, they're much more appealing against right-handed pitching. So while I wouldn't mind getting to some Cleveland bats as one-offs, namely a Jose Ramirez, who's always excellent, I really can't call them a priority stack. Moving into the next game, we have the Battle of the Sox. We got Brayan Bello and Lucas Giolito. That's Red Sox at White Sox this evening. Bello has been pretty excellent, one of the more talented young arms in the American League, coming off several consecutive excellent outings, 22% K rate on the season, 307 WOBA allowed to opposing hitters. I'm just pulling up some of his numbers quickly. One, two, three, four out of his last five starts have gone as quality starts. That means he's going 6 innings or over, allowing 3 earned runs or fewer. The Ks aren't always there for him. But at the same time, he does have the type of stuff I do think we see those numbers start to climb as he gets more time at the major league level. So this White Sox offense that he'll be facing tonight, 23% K rate against right-handed pitching this season, sub 300 WOBA. So Bello, personally, not trying much ownership on either side. He's one of my favorite arms here. I really do like Bello, and I'm going to make note of this versus Chicago White Sox. Excellent GPP play. Yeah, just really surprised to see his ownership that low. Pretty favorable matchup. Really talented young arm. I do expect we see that number climb up a bit during the day, especially if some of these other guys in the early games are dealing with serious weather issues. But for me, Bello, one of my favorite GPP plays. The model kind of agrees, but at the same time, I do think we could see him climb a little bit. Um, but yeah, on the other side of things, we have a pretty solid Red Sox offense taking on Lucas Giolito. Giolito, one of the more inconsistent arms in baseball, certainly capable of an excellent outing, even capable of double-digit strikeouts in certain matchups. But at the same time, I mean, we've seen him implode several times already this season, pushing a 25% K rate, which is great to see. But he's allowing a near 190 ISO to opposing hitters, which is obviously not ideal. This Red Sox offense has around a 170 ISO against right-handed pitching, at least as far as the starting lineup is concerned. But yeah, showing a 150, excuse me, 150-ish team ISO here for Boston, kind of just outside the top 10. I think you can consider them here. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a little tough to trust them in anything but high risk contests. They have upside against Giolito, but I wouldn't call them safe. And I certainly can't call them a priority given some of the other stacks we have available. But yeah, really, really like Brayan Bello on the Red Sox side of things. And then I don't mind Red Sox bats, but it's tough for me to call them a priority. So you might be asking yourself, yeah, you like a lot of arms today. Where are the bats coming from? And one of those spots is going to be this next game. Patrick Sandoval pitching in Coors this evening, taking on Kyle Freeland. That's the Angels at the Rockies. So looking here right now, we have the Angels as the top OF index stack on the board. Top implied team total pushing 7 runs, which is obviously massive. And yeah, I mean the course bump hasn't been as severe this season, but I do think over time we're going to see those numbers start to rise. And yeah, Kyle Freeland just hasn't been great. 180 ISO allowed to opposing hitters, only striking out 14% of opposing batters. Um, and yeah, he's actually been half decent at home historically. But yeah, 7 earned runs allowed last time out against Atlanta. He's had some terrible starts in here. 5 earned runs allowed against Texas, Arizona. And he's in a tough spot here against the Angels. So the Angels are going to be extremely popular. I think in cash games and low risk type contests, you're going to want to play them. They're a little bit too cheap on both sides outside of guys like Otani and Trout. We talked about Renfro to start the video. I think he, Taylor Ward, Brandon Drury are all excellent plays. We hop over to the model here. But yeah, it really should come as no surprise that the Angels are popping. Otani, Drury, Trout, Renfro, like I said. You're getting Wallach for very cheap if he's in the lineup. Ward, Renfigo, pretty much anyone that's in here. Guys like Velasquez don't, and what's his name? Renhefo don't have a ton of power, but they're both dirt cheap, so you're getting really strong upside. You're getting Coors bats for sub 3K on DK, which is always very appealing. So there are ways to get difference with this stack. To get different with this stack, sorry, struggling with my words this morning, but they're in Coors. And they're facing a mediocre lefty, so you're gonna have to get to some Angels. But like I said, they're super, super popular. Freeland's actually been better at home this season, which is a little bit surprising to see. But obviously, their upside is as good as any stack on the entire slate. We see Colorado floating around the top five as well. I think we have to look at them here. Um, and yeah, still no CJ Cronback, which is obviously unfortunate. But Patrick Sandoval has allowed 5+ earned runs in back-to-back starts. I'm just pulling up some of his numbers here. And I think if we're going to get them much lower owned than the Angels in tournaments, especially high-risk contests, I would probably rather get to some of these Rocky bats. Sandoval's done a pretty good job limiting damage. Obviously, the Coors bump, though, could help carry some of those balls out of the park. Um, let's see here. But yeah, I mean, he doesn't really allow a ton of fly balls, so not generally the type of pitcher you want to target in cores. But like I said, just a ton of upside for this Rockies order. They're very, very cheap. We have Montero, Tover, Alfaro, and Diaz are both catchers. You can play them both on FanDuel if you use a utility spot. Personally, I think Diaz is the much better of the two, but at the same time, Alfaro is much cheaper on DK. That is, Grichuk looks outstanding here. Always like him against lefties. So yeah, keep an eye on the lineup. I wouldn't be afraid to play guys like McMahon against Sandoval, but definitely favor the right-handed hitters here. Um, yeah, anytime you get a mediocre lefty in cores, this has been the case back to when they had Arenado and Story. Obviously, they're not that good anymore. Um, but yeah, we have to take a look at the Rockies here, and I think if you're looking at the ownership of them compared to the Angels, they are very, very appealing as a tournament stack. So I like the bats from both sides. The Angels certainly the safer play. If you can fit in those high price guys like Trout, Otani, obviously I think they have more upside. But at the same time, looking at ownership, I do think the Rockies might actually be the better tournament play. Um, I guess at least hypothetically speaking. Moving into the next game on the slate, we have Patrick Corbin and the Washington Nationals taking on Joe Musgrove and the San Diego Padres. So San Diego popping is one of the top stacks. Patrick Corbin for the Nationals, obviously on the back end of his career, seems to allow at least a couple home runs each start. Only allowed 4 earned runs last time out, which isn't great against Miami. 11 hits or 14 hits, which is just ridiculous. So even though he's not allowing a lot of power, he is allowing a lot of hits. He is allowing a lot of runs. The Padres have some guys that can swipe some bags too, so you're getting upside in that regard. But yeah, really do like San Diego here. Should come as no surprise. I do imagine they're going to be the second most popular stack after the Angels. But yeah, I mean, they are hitting the ball really well. Guys like Machado, Tatis, all locked in. We saw Gary Sanchez homer again yesterday. Juan Soto, don't be afraid to play him against the lefty here. So really, really do like Padres bats. And that is against Corbin. So on the other side of things, I think we could take a look at Joe Musgrove as an arm we may want to consider. Coming off back-to-back quality starts, no strikeouts last time out against Tampa, but that's a Tampa team that is one of the more patient in baseball, generally speaking. Um, Prior to that, he had struck out 5, 8, 3, 6, 6, respectively. So even though he didn't show it recently, Musgrove does have plenty of upside here. Seeing a lot of ownership on both sides, priced similarly to guys like Bassett and Bieber. So I do consider Musgrove an arm we can certainly consider here. And the issue, if there is an issue, it's just that these Nationals don't K all that much. But I think he is cheap enough to consider here as a tournament play. And he has a pretty high floor too. If you wanted to play him as an SP2 in cash on DK, I wouldn't call you crazy, but it's Padres bats and Patrick Corbin from that one. Moving into the next game on the slate, we have JP France and the Houston Astros taking on Emmett Sheehan and the Los Angeles Dodgers. So Sheehan was awesome for us in his debut. Look great. Really good strikeout stuff. I mean, tonight he's in a much more difficult matchup, though, facing these Dodgers. Dodgers do K23, or facing these Astros, excuse me. The Astros only K 21% of the time against right handed pitching. Sheen did a good job limiting damage, but I think in a matchup like this against a patient team, where he's more expensive than a lot of these arms we talked about, the Bellows, the Musgroves, Bassett, even Senga, I think he's priced similarly. I don't know that I want to get to him. He's very low owned in large field tournaments. If you're playing a bunch of lineups, I maybe get to him some, but I do respect him enough not to want to get to Houston bats. On the other side of things, JP France has been pretty solid, just a 20% K rate though. So against this Dodgers lineup, I don't have all that much interest. And yeah, we see the Dodgers popping in the model. So France has been mostly solid, but he has struggled against right-handed hitting. So specifically, Mookie Betts, Will Smith, JD Martinez are all excellent plays here. Those three are maybe my favorite bats on the slate. So I do like the Dodgers a lot here, but definitely favor the right-handed hitters versus JP France. Um, but yeah, don't sleep on them. Really, really low ownership. We're looking at 29% aggregate on DK, 38 on FanDuel. I think people just see that France has been solid, pretty low ERA, et cetera, et cetera. But the power numbers against righties have not been very good. So I do think we're getting upside here with a low-owned Dodgers stack that one could argue is one of the best offenses in all of baseball. So last game here, we have Zach Davies and the Arizona Diamondbacks taking on Logan Webb and the San Francisco Giants. I'm starting with Logan Webb. He is very expensive here. This is not a good matchup by any stretch against this Arizona Diamondbacks team. They only K 20% of the time against right-handed pitching. But Logan Webb, if we're just looking at statistics this season, arguably one of the better arms on the slate. Only 10% swing strike rate, which isn't great, but he does get a lot of called strikes, around a 25% K rate. So while I don't totally trust him here, I think in large field he is an arm you can consider as an upside play. There's not a ton of great arms in these late games, so if you're playing a late slate, probably going to land on some Logan Webb. But yeah, at the same time, obviously Arizona, one of the more dangerous offenses in baseball right now. Just a ton of talent throughout that order. For me personally, I'll probably get to a little bit of Logan Webb, but it's tough for me to call him a priority just in a tough matchup against Arizona. Uh, then on the other side of things, we have Zach Davies. Davies, 18% K rate, not allowing a ton of power, just a 136 ISO to opposing hitters, but a 360 WOBA. So a lot of contact for Davies, which isn't surprising knowing he doesn't miss many bats. San Francisco just outside the top 10 here. I don't think it would be crazy to maybe go to them with some of these lefties like Peterson, Lamonte Wade if he's leading off Michael Conforto. But yeah, I don't mind the Giants here. But yeah, certainly favor the left-handed hitters against Zach Davies. So yeah, let's pull up my quick notes here. Just to quickly recap some of this weather. Um, yeah, Seattle at Baltimore, we got to keep an eye on. Texas at New York, obviously not great, but we have a few hours before we have to make decisions in that one. We do like Senga for the Mets, but that probably is the worst weather of any of these games, them taking on Philadelphia. So definitely keep an eye on that. But as far as top stacks go, we have the Angels and Coors. They're going to be super chalky. The Rockies also facing a mediocre lefty in Coors, much lower owned. Still plenty of upside. So tough not to like Coors bats tonight. Again, Rockies in high risk stuff, Angels and low risk stuff. Dodgers look great here. Favor the right-handed hitters against France. They're two low owns. Padres look great against Corbin. They'll likely be popular here, but I do really like their upside. The Red Sox risky, but they do have upside against Giolito. And then the Blue Jays bats favor the lefties against Caprillion. Giants favor the lefties against Davies. I'm clicking over to the pitchers page. Logan Gilbert, if the weather cooperates, looks good against Baltimore. Kodai Senga, if the weather cooperates, looks fine against Philly. Chris Bassett looks versus Oakland is good, but if he's super popular, I could see going elsewhere. Don't mind Shane Bieber here, kind of limited K upside, but it is a favorable matchup. Bello against the White Sox, one of my favorite tournament plays on the entire slate. I also like Joe Musgrove here and Logan Webb. So 10-game slate tonight, a lot of weather we need to keep an eye on. Taking a look at how long this video was. We are under 30 minutes, so we did it, everyone. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter at Nick Marro DFS. As always, like, subscribe. It really helps us get more of these videos out to you. And if you're not a member, check the links, jump in the Discord, say hello. Let's have some fun tonight, everyone, and make some money. Take care and good luck.